Rob, you certainly have seen a lot of Seattle Seahawks football. What did you make of the Bears' decision to tab Shane Waldron as a new offensive coordinator, especially as they head on into this new landscape with a new quarterback?
I thought it makes an awful lot of sense. What Shane Waldron was able to do the last couple of years with Geno Smith in particular, I thought, kind of speaks for itself. And we're talking about the NFL's comeback player of the year a couple of seasons ago, back to back, Pro Bowl nods. And even though the Pro Bowl isn't what it once was, but just the development of Geno Smith at the quarterback position. When Geno Smith goes down, Drew Lock comes in and also has a big time performance on Monday Night Football to beat the Philadelphia Eagles, and the fact that we saw just the creativity of the way that he used his offense. The tight ends were involved. Of course, Chicago's got a terrific tight end in Cole Kmet, and the versatility of the wide receivers, the way that they use their running backs. Offensive line continued to be an issue, but I think that's bigger than Shane Waldron. So I think that this is a bright young coach who, frankly, got kind of the short end of the stick with the Seahawks deciding to move elsewhere. Obviously, with Pete Carroll basically being forced into I don't know if I want to call it early retirement, but
Right.
into retirement.
Yeah, he still seems pretty energetic. I don't think he'll be stopping soon. Specifically, what did Shane Waldron do so well for Geno Smith?
I think that he just helped him in terms of really taking advantage of his unique skill set. Geno Smith has always been a very accurate quarterback, going all the way back to his days at West Virginia. I personally gave him a second round grade, wasn't surprised at all when that's exactly where he was selected. But there was a little bit of hero ball to Geno Smith back in the day. And so I thought that he did a nice job. He and, of course, Pete Carroll, the quarterback coach Dave Canales as well, did a really nice job, I think, of kind of helping Geno Smith harness that eagerness to try to make every throw, and instead kind of dropping his eyes from the deep ball to some of the intermediate areas, and occasionally just tucking the ball and running it himself. So in that way, I think that he helped Geno Smith, and from an overall offensive perspective, I thought that Shane Waldron showed some creativity. The way that Seattle lined players up, sometimes you would see three tight ends on the field at the same time and things of that nature. And I think that makes sense when you consider just how different the defenses were in the NFC West. Of course, you had the LA Rams and Aaron Donald, who has just ruined more, opportunities for the Seahawks and just about any defensive player and probably in league history. But then especially with the San Francisco 49ers, who thumped Seattle several times. But I think that he gave Seattle a fighting chance just because Seattle didn't just kind of, try and run the ball right down San Francisco's throat. They really did try to do some creative things to keep the 49ers and the rest of the NFC off balance.
Schematically, stylistically, who is Shane? What can Bears fans expect to see when we come to September?
Yeah, I think again you're going to see some creativity. You're going to see running backs being asked to not only be runners, of course, but also receivers out of the backfield be expected to provide quality pass protection. I mean, everybody says that, but some offensive coordinators absolutely demand it. The Seahawks surprised a lot of people by selecting two running backs in the draft a year ago, fresh after having Kenneth Walker III, who was the runner-up for Offensive Rookie of the Year 2 seasons ago. Zach Charbonnet, the second-round pick, got onto the field almost immediately, in part because he could pass protect. Whereas Kenny McIntosh of the national champion Georgia Bulldogs at that time did not get onto the field, again, in large part because he just wasn't perceived to be reliable enough in pass protection. So I think that kind of sticking to your guns mentality for a young coach is impressive. And then again, the ability to use multiple different pass catchers in the offense. You're not just catering to the DK Metcalfs or the Tyler Lockett's of the world. You really are trying to sprinkle in those secondary receivers as well as the tight end. So I expect Chicago to be more multiple on offense and create that many more issues for opposing defenses.
I've seen your mock draft. I'm glad we don't have to play the game of Caleb Williams going number one overall or not. That's where you have Caleb going. And you mentioned Hero Bowl too. I think Caleb was forced into some Hero Bowl because of his last year at USC, playing from behind, a struggling offensive line. But again, that seems to make sense as well with what you said about Geno Smith. What do you think of that pairing? What do you think of that fit between Waldron and Caleb Williams?
I'm encouraged by it because Waldron does have the experience. He's got, I often use the expression, the proof is in the pudding. Well, I think that Shane Waldron can kind of say, hey, Caleb, I just helped a young man who is as, not quite as gifted as Caleb Williams is, but still go to heights that very few were anticipating that Geno Smith would ever come to, based on how much that he had struggled and basically been relegated to a backup for 7 years in the NFL. Back when Caleb Williams was, still probably in junior high or middle school at that point. So I think that is going to be something that is going to resonate, I believe, with Caleb Williams. And the fact that that Shane Waldron was able to make Seattle's offense, again, as versatile as it was, I think is going to be intriguing, because if you watch USC's tape, then you see Caleb Williams pretty much relying on his primary wide receivers. They had a good running game at USC as well. But to your point, I mean, this was not the USC of old. This was basically 3 or 4 skill position players, and then a bunch of guys along the offensive line that may or may not have NFL futures. And so I think that what Caleb Williams was able to do at USC the last couple of years really just kind of speaks to his raw talent. And that's one of the things I think that Shane Waldron did a terrific job of, is basically taking full advantage of Seattle's unique prospects, whether it be the wide receiver or at the tight end positions in particular. You basically using Jackson Smith-Njigba, Seattle's first round pick, of course, a year ago, in a way that really complemented his game, rather than forcing kind of a round peg into a square hole type of a situation. So that's one of the things that I am encouraged by. I think that with Caleb Williams, you have a player who is at his best in improvising. And so I expect there to be plenty of rollout opportunities for Caleb Williams in Chicago, taking advantage of his unique accuracy on the move as well as in the pocket. Obviously, you're going to have a quarterback who's 6'1", so I do expect there to be plenty of shotgun snaps, just to take advantage of the fact that he does have terrific vision for that height, but also it's just going to create that many more easy passing lanes for him to exploit. So again, to me, one of the things I like about Shane Waldron is that he showed an ability to kind of adapt to the talent level that he had on the field with him at that time. And I also think that it's encouraging that he basically kind of forced players to toe the line a little bit. If you weren't able and ready to play, then you didn't play. They weren't sacrificing the rest of the team just to try to get a young player onto the field. And I think that's something that any young quarterback needs to feel, to believe if he's going to reach his maximum potential.
Did Geno talk much about Shane Waldron coaching him up between the ears, helping him get to where he's gotten to, where you don't often see a guy relegated to a backup to then earning a sizable contract as a starter? What about kind of the mental aspect of the game as well, the relationship between the two? Did Geno open up much about that, or on Shane's side as well?
I think that there was a healthy deal of respect on both sides, that they both were complimentary of each other. That's one of the things that I noticed about Geno Smith and who he is now compared to who he was back then, is that he was so gracious with the compliments for all of his teammates, all of his coaching staff. Anytime that there was any mistakes, he fell on the sword, and just basically refused to say a negative word about anybody. And so I believe Geno Smith in his words, but at the same time, I also think that he was savvy enough that if he did have any problems with any of his coaches, that he wasn't going to throw them under the bus.
Rob, a little draft talk from you, if you don't mind. If things go perfectly for the Bears from a realistic standpoint, if things went realistically perfect, who do you think they would want, or who do you think could be there for them at number 9?
I fully expect the Chicago Bears to select Caleb Williams, number one overall, of course, and then come back at number 9 or in a possible small trade down scenario and just readdress their offensive line. I think that this class is phenomenal in that way. And obviously, when you have players like DJ Moore, now Keenan Allen, and Cole Kmet, as I mentioned before, I really think that the pass catchers are in place for Chicago and, again, Caleb Williams to kind of hit the ground running this upcoming season. But I still have some reservations along the offensive line. I know that a lot of Chicago Bears fans do as well. I think in an ideal scenario, we're talking about a guy like a J.C. Latham from Alabama, a Talia Sifuaga from Oregon State. As you might be able to guess based on the pictures in my background here, I'm actually a scout for the BC Lions of the Canadian Football League. And so I was able to attend the Oregon State Pro Day. And I watched the Chicago coaches working out Taliesin Fuaga. And you could just see the excitement in their eyes and working with this young man. 6'6", 325 pounds. It just moves almost like a tight end rather than an offensive lineman of that size. And his power, I think, would be able to allow him to come into Chicago. I think that he is a natural right tackle, but also could slide inside at guard. I think that physicality, that versatility would match up very, very well with what the Bears are looking to do and Shane Waldron is looking to do as well.
So with the selection of Darnell Wright last year, at right tackle, you think they could still make that move, albeit another right tackle in the first round?
I think they could. I think ideally a player like Joe Alt, who, of course, from Notre Dame, the local product and all that kind of stuff, and your left tackle would be able to just slide right in. I don't know that Alt realistically is going to be available to them at that spot. Latham and Fuaga, both, in my opinion, are athletic enough that I think that they might be able to push for that left tackle position. Frankly, I think that Darnell Wright could do the exact same thing. I think that the most critical thing, I just have confidence in Chicago's ability to coach up these young linemen. If you are as athletic as Latham and Fuaga are, then I really think that they have the ability to play both sides. And finally, one other player I would mention, again, went to the University of Washington Pro Day as well. Troy Fautanu is a player that, an offensive lineman that a lot of people seem to be sleeping on. I am significantly higher on Fautanu than I am, say, Olu Fashanu, who a lot of people are bandying about as, the elite left tackle prospect in this draft class, or possibly even ahead of Alt, which to me, I disagree with that. I don't see the physicality. I don't see the toughness against bull rushers that I think that you have to have if you're going to play in the NFL at a high level, especially one in a division as physical as the NFC North. So, again, in my opinion, I think that we're talking about tackles like Latham, like Fuaga, like Fautanu, rather than some of the other tackles out there that are being often hyped, like a Fashanu, who I just think might have a little bit more growing pains in the NFL than maybe his media hype would suggest.
Certainly don't expect Marvin Harrison Jr. to be anywhere near available at number 9. Who would be your next wide receiver off the board? And I'm with you, by the way. I think it should be bolstering the offensive line, allow Caleb Williams to play on time more often. But if they do decide to go wide receiver, who do you think, or in your eyes, who is number 2 off your board and then number 3 wide receiver?
Yeah, to me, there's basically it's a four-headed monster, essentially, at wide receiver this year. I think once you get past the top 4, then there is a little bit of a drop-off. And I think that you can kind of, with Harrison being the number 1 receiver, at least in my opinion, I know some clubs out there who like Malik Neighbors from LSU or Rome Odunze from Washington again, or Neighbors' teammate at LSU, Brian Thomas Jr., Brian Thomas Jr. And Brian Thomas Jr. is a guy that I think is being slept on by an awful lot of people. I talked to scouts, and they are very, very high on him. Don't think that there's any chance that he is going to slip past, say, the top 15. And so he is a player that I would not be surprised at all to see somebody pull the trigger on him in the top 10, which would, I think, surprise some people. With DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, both terrific football players, but neither of them are really imposing, really, big body type of players. So I especially like the idea of an Odunze Odunze or Brian Thomas Jr., both of them at 6'3", both of them at 215, both of them have at least 4.4 speed. And in the case of Thomas, he's a 4.3 guy. He's a little bit less polished. This is a former basketball player and focused on basketball almost all throughout his high school career, whereas Rome Odunze is about as polished as it gets. So I think that either one of those two, if the Bears were to select either one of those two, then I think that Shane Waldron, Caleb Williams, and a lot of Chicago Bears fans are going to be really, really happy.
One in division question for you. Kevin O'Connell, Minnesota Vikings. Any read, any guess on who the Vikings are going to run out there under center, or at least get started prepping for?
Yeah, we've basically taken this conversation and gone basically all University of Washington, and I think that the Vikings are going to try to keep Michael Penix Jr. in purple. I really anticipate that if he is on the board available to them, then he will be their selection. I believe it's number 11 overall. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they package their 2 first-round picks. Of course, they acquired one from Houston to try to move up to get him. Penix is a quarterback that I think a lot of people are sleeping on right now. There's so much hype about J.J. McCarthy, who I really like, but I don't think is quite as clean of a fit in Kevin O'Connell's system as Michael Penix is. Look, with all due respect to Caleb Williams, clearly the number 1 quarterback in this class, in my opinion. A huge part of that is because he is so accurate both in the pocket and on the move. Penix isn't as accurate on the move, but from the pocket, his arm strength, his accuracy, the velocity, the touch is just unbelievable. I think that he is a top 10, at least top 15 caliber prospect. And my biggest concerns about him were the medical grades. I know that there's been several clubs that have done the extra work on him, and everything is coming back clean with Penix. So again, I really think when it's all said and done, somehow, some way, Michael Penix Jr. is going to be a member of the Minnesota Vikings.
Rob, I appreciate it. A world without Pete Carroll leading the Seahawks. That's going to be interesting, right?
It certainly will be. I'm going to miss his enthusiasm,
Same.
But and I think that he's a Hall of Fame coach. So I think that we have not heard the last from Pete Carroll from the public spotlight. But at the same time, I also think that the Seahawks basically need to kind of turn the page. Things have been getting stale, and I know that a lot of folks in Seattle are very excited about Mike McDonald and more of a defensive mentality. Obviously, Pete Carroll had that same thing as well, but I think sometimes you have to kind of turn the page, and it felt like this was the right time for the Seahawks.
Rob, thanks for your time. Enjoy the draft.
No problem. Thank you for having me.